Tomorrow in Paris, they celebrate 14 Juillet, the French Republic's National Day. Vive la belle France! It seems almost rude to point out that so far this year, more than 22,000 people have risked their lives to get from there to here. The Entente Cordiale is still alive and well. Starmer and Macron even plan to exchange gifts, starting with 50 illegal migrants each week. Policing the borders is pretty hard. Policing city streets is even harder, says Britain's top cop, especially when there's no money. The Prime Minister's having to do a little policing of his own troops. Labour MPs and unions are grumbling. Time to get the cabinet in line. So 22,000 and counting. It's a record year for small boat crossings, so the Transport Secretary has both dinghies and electric vehicles on her mind this morning. Heidi Alexander joins us shortly. Frustrating and unacceptable. Harsh words for the justice system from England's most senior police officer. Sir Mark Rowley gives this programme exclusive access to a dawn raid. And we'll get reaction to that interview and the record small boat crossings from the Shadow Home Secretary, Trevor Phillips. With us throughout the show, former BBC Director General Greg Dyke, Times columnist and contributing editor Cindy Yu, and former editor at The Sun, David Yelland. Welcome to Sunday Morning with Trevor Phillips. Last year, the International Organization for Migration estimated that there were over 300 million people living and working outside the country of their birth, more than at any time in human history. Here in Britain, it can sometimes sound as though that entire tide of humanity is surging inexorably to our shores. But we're hardly in the front line. In absolute numbers, the United States, Germany and Saudi Arabia stand above us as destination countries for immigrants, legal and illegal. 1 in 6 of us is foreign-born, but 1 in 3 people living in Australia arrive from somewhere else. And proportionately, the immigrant populations of Germany, Spain and Canada are larger than ours. There may be 50,000 people crossing the Channel this year illegally, way too many. But last year, 130,000 made it across the Mediterranean into Italy and Spain. And that was dwarfed by the 2 million or so apprehended by the Americans at their southern border. None of this is to diminish just how hard the choices facing governments everywhere, irrespective of political outlook, are. But it's worth remembering that we're not unique, and we're far from alone in trying to tackle the challenge of illegal migration. And in politics, sometimes a little perspective helps. Let's see what perspective we can glean from the government. A short time ago, I spoke to the Transport Secretary, Heidi Alexander. Heidi Alexander, this week we learned the economy had shrunk again. The Cabinet met twice this week. Did you come up with any great ideas about how you are going to generate economic growth?
Well, Trevor, I think the first thing to say is whilst from month to month GDP figures might bump around a little bit, of course, we have had the strongest growth of any country in the G7 in the first 3 months of this year. You will be aware, and your viewers may have heard, that since this government came into office, we have secured over £120 billion of inward investment. And so I think our plan to bring stability to the economy, which was central to that budget that the Chancellor Rachel Reeves delivered in October of last year, to make sure that families across the country weren't dealing with the sort of chaos that they saw under Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng. We've seen those interest rates come down 4 times. I think it is really important that we bring that stability back to the economy, and that's what we
before we
have
go,
done.
Our viewers are familiar with that list, but over the growth over the last quarter, most people think, came courtesy of Donald Trump. A lot of activity pushed forward to avoid tariffs. But the long-term trend is downwards. Is there going to be any change in strategy to kickstart growth? Because it's still flat.
So if you look at what the Chancellor did at the spending review, she made it a priority to invest in things like transport infrastructure, because we know that over the longer term, we have to improve productivity in some of the great cities in this country outside of London, places like Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool, Leeds, Newcastle. We've secured £15.6 billion worth of investment in transport infrastructure. We've got the reforms to the planning system that we are driving through at pace. Of course, the OBR scored that as having a very significant impact upon future growth. So getting the construction sector thriving is really important.
We're going to come to all of that. The Chancellor's pointed out that the decision recently forced by your backbenchers on welfare reform means that you're going to have to find some new money somehow. Here's what your former leader, Lord Kinnock, said to us last week.
An imposition of 2% on asset values above 10 million, say, which is a very big fortune, the government would be in a position to collect 10 or 11 billion a year.
Did the Cabinet talk about that, wealth tax?
Not directly at the away day. We are very cognizant of the need to address...
When you say not directly, what's directly and indirectly? I mean...
Well, I think
you'd be the only people in the country who weren't talking about it.
I think your viewers would be surprised if we didn't recognise that at the budget, the Chancellor will need to look at the OBR forecast that is given to her and will make decisions in line with the fiscal rules that she has set out. We made a commitment in our manifesto not to be putting up taxes on people on modest incomes, working people. We have stuck to that. We haven't put up income tax. We haven't put up VAT, apart from taking away those VAT tax breaks that people who send their children to private school get. And we obviously haven't put up employees' national insurance.
But we're going to get a budget in a few months' time. We shouldn't be surprised if there are tax rises, should we?
So the Chancellor will set her budget. I'm not going to sit in a TV studio today and speculate on what the contents of that budget might be. We are determined that...
I'm just saying tax rises must be on the table.
Well, when it comes to taxation, fairness is going to be our guiding principle. If you look at some of the decisions that we have taken in the last 12 months, for example, making those changes to non-DOMs, asking people who send their children to private school to pay a bit more, increasing the tax paid on private jets. And yes, we took that difficult decision to increase national insurance contributions paid by employers, but we did that. It was necessary to do that.
Forgive me, I don't want
to get the investment into public
I don't want to spend too much on time on the past, because you've just said that fairness is a principle. Fair enough. That sounds like code for redistribution, which to other people means there will be some tax rises, particularly on the wealthy. Why not say that?
So I'm not going to set a budget in July when the budget comes in October. You will be aware that the global economy is very volatile at the moment. We have struck those 3 trade deals, which other countries haven't, with the US, with the EU reset, with India. We need to look at what the OBR forecasts are, and the Chancellor will take her decisions in the round. We are clear that we need to be investing in public services. That was a priority of the British people when the general election happened last year. They want to see that investment in the NHS. Of course, we've delivered 4 million more elective appointments.
I'm coming to that. OK, just before we leave the economy, just let me ask you very, very quickly. This weekend, we've learned that your biggest union backer, Unite, is so hostile to much of what you've been doing. It's kicked out Andrew Rain. I don't want to get into the question of who's a member and not a member. The point is that the response that we heard from Labour source is to dismiss Unite's criticism as silly stunts. Is it reasonable to dismiss criticism in that way?
Well, first things first, Trevor, I think that Angela rescinded her membership of Unite a number of months ago. What I'm focused on and what this government is focused on is delivering improvements
But
for the men and women who
is
get up
even
early in the
among-
morning
even-
every day to go into work.
But even
And if you
amongst
look at what
Labour's
we've done,
own supporters,
Trevor,
your backbenchers, the unions. You managed to unite the union for the first time. It's notoriously vociferous, that union. They're all united against you at the moment.
The union members I speak to do recognise what this government has done in the last 12 months, whether that is increasing the national living wage and the national minimum wage, benefiting 3 million people in this country, the lowest paid, to the tune of thousands of pounds every year. We've changed the law when it comes to sick pay. Remember COVID, when people couldn't get sick pay?
The union's unrepresentative?
What I'm saying is that it's a priority of this government to deliver for the working men and people of this country, be that on increases to the minimum wage, the changes we're making to ban exploitative zero-hour contracts, the changes that we're making to ensure that people can access sick pay on day one of being sick. And let's cast our minds back to what happened in COVID and those people that couldn't get their hands on sick pay. I think these are the changes that this Labour government is determined to deliver.
All right, well, let's look forward to the things that you are going to deliver. You're announcing £63 million for electric vehicles infrastructure today. Where are we going with this? Is it your desire to live in a country where everybody has and drives an electric vehicle, or is there still going to be room for hybrid vehicles, petrol and so on? Norway has pretty much 100%. The United States has decided it wants to offer choice. Where are we going to be?
So we'd set out the trajectory a couple of months ago when we made some changes to something called the Zero Emission Vehicles Mandate. And unlike the previous Conservative government, who were all over the place on these issues, we have made it clear that we will phase out the sale of petrol and diesel cars that are solely powered by an internal combustion engine, by 2030. That's the sale of new cars. We will allow hybrids to be sold through until 2035. We need to do this in a pragmatic way. We are committed to achieving net zero by 2050, and we know that the emissions that come from road transport are a very significant amount of our domestic emissions. And so we need to make this transition. There's huge economic opportunity in this as well, Trevor, in terms of the jobs of the future. But we need to do it in a way where we take people with us.
So your aim is to get the internal combustion engine off the road and net zero, whatever the cost?
So we believe that over the next 25 years, and remember that the changes that we're bringing in just relate to the sale of new petrol and diesel cars and whether hybrids are going to be allowed to be sold through until 2035, which they will be. 80% of cars that are bought each year are bought on the second-hand market. So petrol and diesel cars are going to be around for a long time, but we have to start making the changes now to clean up the vehicles on our road. But most importantly, to make sure that we've got the really good, high-paid, secure jobs of the future in electric car and vehicle manufacturing.
I noticed that your plans depend on attracting £6 billion worth of private sector investment. Is that the same £6 billion that the charge point operators announced that they were going to spend in 2023 under the Tories, or is it another £6 billion?
So this is a partnership between the public sector and the private sector. This year, we are putting in about £380 million into improving charging infrastructure, and through the spending review, I secured a further £400 million to invest in charging infrastructure, because we know that one of the things that people are concerned about is whether the charge points are going to be
range anxiety
in the
and all of
places
that
they want. But that sits alongside the investment from the private sector. So this is a partnership.
But that was the investment that the Tories boasted that they'd leave it in, isn't it?
There's a huge amount. There is confidence. There is confidence in the private sector about investments. I visited Instavolt's rapid charging hub down in Winchester, which really is a glimpse of the future, Trevor, to be honest. They've got solar panels, they've got battery storage there, they've got a huge number of rapid
You're not answering the
charging.
question I asked. Is it the same £6 billion that the Conservatives said that they had levered out of the private sector, or is it new money?
So the 6 billion is money that the private sector has said that it will be investing over the next few years. Now, obviously, the proof is in the pudding. Everyone can say that the investment is coming. It's when you actually see the new rapid charging hubs being built.
Okay. Sorry. Can I move on to talk about migration, which has been the big story of the week? Sir Keir met President Macron, made this deal with France over illegal small boat crossing. Do we know if that has to be approved by the EU before it can be put into operation? Or can have the French decided they can just get on with it?
So we believe that we've got a robust and workable arrangement with the French. This is a groundbreaking deal, and it's a groundbreaking approach because previous governments have sought to get an agreement with the French. When they stopped sticking two fingers up to the French, it's got to be said, previous governments, and we realise that the only way you're going to tackle this problem is to do the serious hard yards working with international partners.
But can the French do it irrespective of what Brussels says? Because actually Spain and Italy have already said they don't fancy it much. Can the French do this independently?
So we strongly believe and are confident that we have got a workable deal with France. We've been working very closely with them, for example, on the changes that they are making to the action that they will take in the shallow waters in France to prevent those boats from leaving in the first place. Your viewers may have seen some of the footage of actually French authorities puncturing those dinghies, because if we can stop the dinghies reaching British shores, that's going to be a positive for everyone involved. Not people making perilous crossings across the channel, but also actually not having to then process these individuals that get here. And part of the French agreement is about saying that we will return those people who are landing on our shores, and in exchange for that, we will open up a new safe legal route for people that have family connections here and who are genuinely claiming asylum. And that is part of what this deal is.
But they can refuse some of the people we sent back, can't they? Why would they take back violent offenders and rapists that we send to them?
So there's a lot of operational detail to
that's
work
not an
through
operation. That's a matter of principle.
Yvette Cooper and the Prime Minister will be working on. We believe that we've got a robust, workable deal with President Macron. It's a deal that the previous government weren't able to negotiate. And I think this is ultimately the way in which we break the model of these international people smuggling gangs that are operating in multiple jurisdictions across Europe. What you will have seen since this government came to power, Trevor. No, I'd like to make this point. It's an important point. We have to be making arrests. We have to be making prosecutions. We're doing that not just in England and Wales, but in France and Germany. I get all of that. But there's a matter. That is why we have to be working with President Macron and our allies in Europe to tackle this problem. Look, we're not going to be able to do it on our own.
But the point is, there is a matter of scale here. I understand it's a pilot scheme. I understand you want to ramp it up and all of that. But you won't know if this works as a deterrent until significant numbers are returned. And 1 in 17, which is what's going to be part of the pilot scheme, doesn't prove anything, does it?
Well, those are your numbers and not ours. We're not putting numbers on it.
No, that's your numbers. You said 50.
No, so we're not putting numbers, a target on the number of people that we want to return. If you want to talk numbers, Trevor, let me tell you this. 12,000 crossings that have been stopped this year.
I know you want to talk numbers, but you want to talk numbers about the past. I want to talk numbers about... I want to talk the numbers about of your scheme.
Don't have any right to be here or... and they have been removed. And so you've got to tackle this problem from all angles, Trevor. And that's why we're doing the hard work with our international allies. We're removing more people than the previous government removed, including foreign national offenders.
So is this pilot scheme going to return more than 1 in 17 of those who cross?
Well, once we have got through the pilot phase and we ramp it up, then it is, that's our aspiration. But we've got to learn how this works and take it step by step. It's an important first step. It's an important first step, Trevor,
what is it that you're going to learn?
That the previous government failed to negotiate.
No, you keep wanting to take me back to the past. What is it that you're going to learn from this pilot scheme, then, that you don't already know?
So if there are individuals in France who have family connections to people in the UK and they have a legitimate claim for asylum in Britain, given that they are subject to persecution in their countries from which they originated. We will be opening up a new legal safe route for those individuals to apply. And because it's a reciprocal arrangement, we need to understand how that new process is going to work. We will be detaining individuals at the point at which they hit the British shores. This is a new arrangement. It hasn't been done before. It makes sense to learn how this operates in reality, and then we can ramp it up and increase the scale of it from there.
We'll talk more when we actually see it happening. Can I turn to something which we've been looking at in this programme, and the issue of policing? You, before you represented your current seat, represented a London seat. The Commissioner of the Met told us this week that the racial disparity in homicides in the city are shameful. Do you agree?
I think Mark Rowley raises a very, very serious and important point. And when I was a Member of Parliament in South East London, the hardest moments, not just of my job, but probably some of the hardest moments of my life, were when I met the families of young black boys who had been stabbed to death. And I've got to tell you, Trevor, that the names of Kwame Afuso Asare, Nathaniel Brown and Kevin Sasali will stay with me for the rest of my life. Young black men are disproportionately victims of crime in London, and I think we have to do all that we can to make sure that not only are we effectively policing our streets, and of course the Labour government has committed to 13,000 extra police officers, £200 million this year to get extra PCSOs and police officers onto the streets, but we have also got to address why these young men, and they are predominantly young men, are being drawn into crime in the first place. One of the saddest moments when I was an MP was talking to community leaders, and they said to me that actually you could go into some primary schools and at the age of 5 or 6, you could spot the boys that in 10 years' time would be in a pupil referral unit. So Mark is right to recognise that things like exclusions from school disproportionately affect young black boys as well. And, you know, I think it's, an overriding imperative of this government and indeed the current Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, to address
One thing that the government could do is at the other end of the process. Rowley says that in one part of the city, court cases that for people that they've arrested and charged are now being scheduled for 2029, which means that suspects won't be tried for 4 years. They may be violent people who allegedly committed a crime against somebody locally. They will be walking the pavement, and their victims, their alleged victims, will be walking those same pavements. Now, isn't the urgent thing to do to get some of those people off the streets? And that depends on finding places for them in jails. Isn't that a priority for the government now?
So the prison population has very high levels of remand prisoners at the moment, and the most serious offenders will be held on remand before their trials are heard. This government has also invested more than the previous government in the number of court sitting days in the Crown Court, where the most serious cases are heard. There's 110,000 sitting days in the Crown Court this year, and that is more than the previous Conservative government had in place. We've also done things to speed up the justice system by extending magistrate sentencing powers to 12 months from 6 months. We have to tackle these backlogs in the Crown Court because justice delayed is too often justice denied. And so, the government is taking swift action to deal with this.
Heidi Alexander, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Listening attentively to all that was this morning's panel. With us for the next hour are former BBC Director General Greg Dyke, Times columnist and contributing editor Cindy Yu, and former editor at The Sun, David Yelland. Cindy, let's start with this week's deal on migration. Is it new? Is it going to work?
It is new, but I don't know if it will work, really. I mean, Heidi Alexander wouldn't answer your question of whether or not the French could really go strike this deal unilaterally by themselves. And frankly, the answer is no, it can't, because it has to obey to EU law on that, and member states can't go opening the border or on a returns agreement without consulting other member states. And as you pointed out, southern European states are not happy about this. It might go ahead as a pilot if the French can convince the EU to go ahead with a bit of a trial. But then that raises the question, what deterrent effect is there for a trial that will only return 1 in 17 illegal migrants per week if we're only talking about 50 people a week? So it's hard to see how it will work. At the same time, nothing that has been tried so far has worked. And so, I guess a star for effort.
David, I suppose anybody can count the odds, and 1 in 17 chance of being apprehended. It's a decent risk, isn't it?
Well, I think we're living through a time, for whatever reason, where a lot of people in politics, particularly on the right, but also increasingly on the left, are offering very simple answers to complex problems. So when you look at Heidi Alexander, I have a bit of compassion for her and for Andy. There are no simple answers, but she can't say. That's the last thing she can say. And you look around the world, and I always thought it was very interesting that you took those international comparisons. But really, the people that are smiling this morning are, Farage and Reform, as they watch yet another incumbent government struggle to deal with this impossible issue.
Greg, what do you reckon?
I have no idea if it'll work. I suspect not, because I don't think anyone has got solutions, exactly the point David made. And if I was the Prime Minister, I watch day after day, particularly in this beautiful weather, day after day, more and more boats come arriving, and it's on the telly and being seen all the time, I would be I would make it my number one priority, ultimately, because if you want to win the next election, you have got to solve that by then. There are no easy solutions. We all know that. Farage doesn't have easy solutions, and his answer is you just send them all back to France. Well, what happens when the French don't take them? What do you do with them then? I think it's the movement of people around the world is a massive issue, not just here, but in lots of countries. And it's affecting our politics, is the truth. And I think if he doesn't want to get a very right-wing government in this country, you have got to do something about it. But what? I have no idea.
Well, it's worth saying, and I don't know if we've got the graph to hand, but actually some countries do have some success. It's not exactly something that Labour governments are going to be screeching about, but the most successful initiative on this has come from, Spain and Italy have brought down their numbers quite dramatically, actually, Mrs. Maloney. And then here's the big thing, the United States. If you look at that, the blue line, that's the top lines are the United States illegal crossings over the last few years, 22, 2023, 2024. The blue line, Donald Trump, 2025, cut encounters at the southern border by 95%. Now, a lot of this is stuff that I think some people find hard to stomach, but perhaps we're going to be in that sort of world.
Look, I think that first of all, I think there's some dispute in the US about the accuracy of those figures. But I think you're right. I think the thing that other countries don't have is our media and our media culture, and that is what's driving this issue. And as we sit here, we had that burning effigy of asylum seekers over in County Tyrone, I think just yesterday or the day before that. That tells you something of where the public mindset is. In the US, you don't have that kind of media, but you have a president that is a pure populist. But the US media are not looking at what is happening, or not, most of the US media is not looking at what is actually happening on the southern border. You've got children being separated from their parents. You've got all kinds of stuff that couldn't happen in Europe, I don't think.
What do you think, Cindy? I mean, it can be done.
I'd like to know more about how those countries have done that. But one thing that does stand out for the UK situation, I think at least, is the backlog in the asylum system. You know, we have almost 100,000 people still waiting to hear if they will be approved or not. Of course, there's a massive row over ECHR and whether or not those people, once decided to be deported, can really be deported. But frankly, there are so many people still stuck in the system where their case hasn't even been looked at. And our current laws say that after a certain period of time, they can then start working here. So I actually see this backlog as one of the many post-COVID backlogs that we have developed and not tackled. Why not become more efficient, put that money into dealing with those cases and actually have that deterrent effect where people don't think, oh, as soon as I make it into the border, I'll just stick it out. Because that's what's happening at the moment. If we make sure that they can be actually sent back because the system's processing the cases, then I think that would be, you know, that's an underrated part of the system.
Greg, the French president didn't quite say this, but I think it's the view in France that the real problem here is not really a policing problem. It is a labour market problem, and that is that our employment regime is pretty, they would say, lax. We don't have identity cards. So once you get across the border, nobody can find you. You can get a job, you can work, and that's actually the pull factor.
But the numbers coming here aren't that massive. I mean, I think the point David makes, first of all, it's about the media. There is inevitably going to be people coming into this country as migrants. That's going to happen. The trouble with the boats is that it's great telly. And day after day after day, you know, I did have some suspicion when I saw the pictures this week of the boats coming in, of the boats leaving, and suddenly there was a policeman who was cutting
a French policeman with his knife.
And it so happened the BBC were there that day. And I thought, hang on, why have I not seen this before?
I mean, there's no doubt a lot of media fuss about it, but the case is being made, I think, partly by the French, that we could change the risk calculation here. People are willing to take a bigger risk because they know that the rewards to be able to work and all of that will be substantial. And their case is, if you British made it less likely that people could come and just get a job working in the back of a restaurant or as delivery drivers or whatever it is, then actually they might not be prepared to take that risk.
I think that's right. I think there's a coming debate on ID cards. There's no doubt about that. But just this point on the media, which Greg was picking up on, the thing that's peculiar in this country is there is a coming together of a new media elite and a political elite. GB News, I hate to mention GB News on this, but is a great example. That is a very interesting phenomenon. So they drive a crossover between politics and the media, which is a phenomenon which is driving so much of this. I think that's something that people... That doesn't happen in other countries except from Fox News.
OK, there's a studio full of media people, so I want to come back to that, whether it's our fault or not. Anyway, let's talk about
your fault.
It is just after 9 o'clock. You're watching Sunday Morning with Trevor Phillips. In the last hour, the Transport Secretary's told us fairness will be the guiding principle of the autumn budget. But she wouldn't be drawn on whether that means a wealth tax is on the horizon. We'll get a reaction to that from Shadow Home Secretary Trevor Phillips later this hour. But first, it is not every day you wake up before sunrise and spend the early hours looking for guns. Well, that's not what I do anyway. But for the Metropolitan Police's proactive firearms team, that quite literally is the day job. 4 teams are constantly tracking down weapons and drugs, often striking when suspects least expect it. They make over 200 arrests and seize hundreds of weapons every year. We were given rare access to one of their dawn raids not long ago, and here's what we found. Early morning, West London. 20 police officers set out in pursuit of a tip-off. Somewhere around here, they're told, there's a man with a gun and a stash of drugs. The job of this specialist squad is to get both before they hit the streets. They've been planning this raid for days. The team doesn't know who or what exactly they're going to find here. There could be more than the 2 suspects they know about. There could be more firearms. There could be dogs.
You're going in? You sure?
Yeah. So they've come ready for anything.
Police officer!
The suspect's there, but so too is a young woman, not yet out of her teens. But so far, they haven't found the things they most need to see, the drugs, and if there are any, weapons.
Yeah.
Fine.
Finally, a gun, not locked away, but in a rucksack.
The fact it's in a rucksack means, it looks like it's probably ready to go and take it out into the public domain. I'd suggest that it's readily accessible and he's intending on taking it out of him, because it's a rucksack you take on your day-to-day business. So that's the problem. He's probably not just keeping it in your dress, he's taking it actually out with him while he's walking the streets of London, unfortunately.
The suspect's on his way to the police station. If he's charged and convicted, he'll be put away for at least 5 years, probably more for possession of the drugs and the gun.
Okay, so this is what we found in the address. We found bundles of what we believe is crack cocaine, so prepared into individual rocks. These are a set of electronic scales. They were just on a coffee table in the living room. With that was a knife, some cutting agent, and that's where the drugs are found.
Basically, we just have to sit to the police station and ask you some questions.
The girl who emerges isn't the woman they expected to find. In fact, she isn't a woman at all. She says she's just 17, but like the man, greets arrest like a routine event. There's a danger that any of the officers could have found themselves attacked. They could equally have been at the wrong end of a shotgun or a handgun.
It is quite sad. We've got the 2 occupants in the address. The address, as you can see, is not the greatest of addresses.
Is this typical, basically?
Yes, unfortunately, this is typical. The female wasn't as young as some, but she's still a child.
You find kids that are even younger than... We think she's 17, but even younger than that?
Yeah, we think she's 17, but yeah, sometimes, especially around drug supply, we do find kids younger than that, 13, 14, 15-year-olds.
The crime scene investigation teams made the gun safe. It'll be precious evidence in any trial. It's over to the investigators and the prosecutors now. For the cops, they executed it in the normal way. For the suspects, strikingly, no hysteria. They expect this. This is part of their business, it seems. And most strikingly, we saw hardly any neighbours in the, hour and a half that we've been here. This seems to be something that disturbs nobody because it has become so frequent. And this is life in London or any other big city. Within the hour, the team will be out again, this time on a manhunt. But for them, it's pretty much just another day at the office. Well, a few days after those arrests, I sat down with the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, Sir Mark Rowley. When you took office, you said that you wanted to get some of the most dangerous people off our seats. How's that going?
It's going really well, both on the front of sort of violence against women and girls, where we're targeting the most dangerous 100 men, and we keep cycling that and pulling out from the tens of thousands of offences a year against women, the most dangerous repeat offenders, and getting them off the streets. But then probably more relevant to maybe the conversation we're going to have, given the operation you went out on, we have a violent harm assessment framework to identify the most dangerous men in London in terms of sort of gangs, drugs, violence in that area. And that helps us target the most dangerous. But we've got a range of operations. We've got our county lines operations. I mean, we did an intensification week a couple of weeks ago, made 300 arrests that week, seized weapons, drugs. We also, I think it's nearly 300 children we spotted in those operations who have been exploited, who we've referred into sort of third sector organisations and social services. We're constantly taking firearms off the streets to suppress that effect, some with long-term operations and some with the sort of fast-track operation that you saw out and about. That combination of just being relentless is making us one of the safest sort of big cities in Europe. I mean, our murder rate in London is about a third of New York. It's lower than Toronto, it's lower than Paris, it's lower than Brussels, it's lower than Berlin, it's lower than Madrid. This is a constant suppressive effect going after the most dangerous of people, makes it a safe city.
The job that we saw the proactive firearms team doing, I mean, it's pretty efficient. They got it done. But do you have the capability to deal with the extent of violent crime in London. It may be coming down, but there's still a lot of it. And you've got 3-4 teams of that kind. Is it enough?
We've got 4 teams of that kind. We've got our county lines teams. We've got other organised crimes teams doing some of the other firearms suppression work. I could always use more. We've had to shrink as an organisation over the last 3 years. Over 3 years, this is the last year we'll have shrunk by 3,300 officers and staff in an organisation of just over 40,000. That's really material. But we've been really deliberate and choosy about where we take those cuts, and being able to target the most dangerous remains a high priority. And so teams like that are what makes a difference in keeping London safe and keeping murders coming down and keeping us relatively safe compared to others. But I would always like more. I don't pretend otherwise. Of course I would.
And if I ring up, will somebody come? Well,
exactly.
Actually, the problem is at the moment, most people believe that the answer to that is no.
The answer is yes. If you're in the middle of a crisis and something awful's happening and you phone 999, officers will get there really quickly. I don't pretend we're not a stretch service. We are. We're smaller than I think we ought to be. But I don't want to give a sort of message of a lack of hope or a lack of determination. Our people are so can-do, so dedicated, so relentless in what they do. You saw their sort of good humour and professionalism the other day. We will keep doing everything we can do with the resources that we've got, and we'll keep making the argument for more resources and also for other changes that can free up officers to make more of a difference.
There are a couple of things that maybe could be done to help you.
Yes.
One is, we'll come to resources in a second, but for example, a feature of the criminal justice system right now is you don't have places in jails. Now, your officers might put someone, we saw, going to put somebody away in the next 6 months. That person might go away for 4 or 5 years, but that person might also be back out on the streets in 18 months. It must be demoralising for your people to feel that they do their job, but for reasons which have nothing to do with them, the person they want to take off the streets for 5 or 10 years is back out there within 2.
The thing that is frustrating is if the system, and no system can be perfect, but when the system hasn't managed to turn that person's life around and get them on the straight and narrow, and it just becomes a revolving door. When that happens, of course, that's frustrating for officers. So the more successful prisons and probation and others can be in terms of getting people onto a sort of a law-abiding life from the path they're on, the better. But that is a real challenge. But I mean, we're talking just after the Sir Brian Leveson put his report out about the sort of close to broken criminal justice system, and it's absolutely vital that those repairs and reforms that he's talking about happen really quickly, because the system is now so stretched, the justice system. We've got Snaresbrook Crown Court in London. He's now got more than 100 cases listed for 2029. 2020. Imagine you've been a victim of a crime, Trevor. We've caught the person, we've charged them. Great news, Mr. Phillips. We've got them charged, they're going to court, and then a few weeks later, actually, the trial's listed for 2029. That doesn't feel great, does it?
And he let's call it the
most likely to be, yes.
He's not going to be in jail, is he? He's going to be out on bail. I'm going to see him in the street.
Quite possibly. He's not. If he's remanded in custody, it gets fast-tracked and done within a year or so. But no, if it's someone on bail, then who might have stolen your phone or whatever and going for a Crown Court trial, that could be 4 years away, and that's pretty unacceptable, isn't it?
It's pretty awful.
Yeah. And so the government has recognised this, and they've given the sort of cudgel to Sir Brian Leveson, a very experienced judge. He's come up with a pretty radical set of proposals. He's the expert in that field, and hopefully government will move quickly on those things. I think they will, because they realise it needs to happen.
Well, are you seeing the shift in resources you'd like to see yet?
So I'm not going to speak about the justice system, but in terms of policing, I've seen the Mayor and the Home Secretary sort of fighting hard for police resourcing. It's not where I'd want it to be, but it's better than it might have been without their efforts.
Let's talk about one thing that specifically affects London, though it's reflected elsewhere in the country. Well, there are two aspects of what we saw. One thing I was particularly struck by is that the girl that came out of that flat was a child.
Yeah.
The other thing that was not a surprise is that both the suspects are black. There's racial disparity amongst suspects. There's racial disparity among victims, particularly in relation to knife crime. This is still a problem for the Met, isn't it? Relations with minority communities.
This is so difficult for us. We can't pretend otherwise than we've got a history between policing and black communities where policing has got a lot wrong. We get a lot more right today, but we do still make mistakes. That's not in doubt. I'm being as relentless about standards as we can be, and the vast majority of our people are good people. But that legacy, combined with the tragedy that some of this crime falls most heavily in black communities, that creates a real problem, because the legacy creates concern. Meanwhile, policing, we want to reach into the communities who are suffering most crime and make the biggest difference, because everyone deserves equal chance to thrive in London. It's not right that black boys growing up in London are more likely to be dead by the time they're 18, far more likely than white boys. I think that's shameful for the city. The challenge for us is, as we reach in to tackle those issues, that confrontation that comes from that reaching in, whether it's stop and search on the streets, whether it's sort of operations you see, the danger is that's landing in a environment with less trust, and that makes it even harder. But the people who win out of that are the criminals. Whereas if we can find the way for policing communities to work better together, that's why we're investing in neighbour policing and building those relationships bottom up. But this is really difficult, entrenched issues that go back decades. And I mean, your long career in London in different capacities, you know that well. But we have to find. I'm so determined we have to find a way to get past this, because if policing and black communities can find a way to confront these issues together, we can give black boys growing up in London equal life chances to white boys, which isn't what we see at the moment.
Let me ask you, if I may, as we come to an end, about a couple aspects of this. The role of the police themselves. You wrote in a newspaper last week, police officers aren't social workers. You're expected to deal with problems that other services should be tackling: drugs, homelessness, mental health, and so on. Why don't you just tell your people to walk away from situations where it's not their job, it's somebody else's?
So we are doing some of that. So the first thing I should say, sorry, Trevor, is I'm not trying to demean social work. It's critical.
I know, but it's not your job.
But it's not what we're good at, and so that's the point. So we have walked away. We forced the issue on some of the mental health work that followed into our lap a couple of years ago. And now we've got a much better approach.
When you say force the issue, what do you mean?
Well, I sort of said basically these types of things, we're not going to attend them in 6 months' time. And we called the programme Right Care, Right Person. Because actually, if a relative of yours is in a mental health crisis, you want a mental health professional turning up, not a police officer. And that's what was happening. We forced that issue. But there's still too much mental health work falling into police's hands. Children's home for cared for children, there's too many of them, aren't as well run as they need to be. And children running away too often, and we're chasing kids around London when family situations are in an awful state and we have to do emergency protection orders to take children into care because of something ghastly going on in the home environment. We've had cases where a whole family of children have been living in a police station for 2 days waiting for some availability for foster parents, etc. My officers will do a wonderful job with their best of intent, but that's not the right answer, is it? So there's too many examples like that where that's drawing us away from what we're best at and not giving people in a moment of crisis the support from people who are better at that than we are.
You wrote that there are distractions and bureaucracies.
And those are the distractions. And there's other distractions that talks about the sort of policing of football matches, which draws officers out of communities or other events. There's many of those. The bureaucracies, Do
you want to stop doing that?
So if there's disorder to be dealt with at football matches or other events, then we're going to have to be there. But I think we should have a policy of the polluter pays, because why should the communities of London be effectively subsidising the policing of events that are very heavily profit-making? The other point, so distractions in bureaucracies, the point about bureaucracies, some of them are self-created within policing, but some are created elsewhere. The justice process has got far more bureaucratic and slow over the last 6 or 7 years. Some of those are policy changes, some of those are legal changes. But it is, if I look at what an officer has to do now, to get a case to the point of charge, it takes so much longer and so much more paperwork than it took 5 years ago. If I compare it to what I was doing 30 years ago, it's completely unrecognisable. But all of that adds to sapping the ability of the police to do the best job possible. Some of it we can deal with by the best of modern technology and cut through some of that, some automation. But assuming the priority going forward for government remains on things like military spending and health spending because of other factors in the world, I understand that, then to give police a chance to succeed, getting the distractions and bureaucracies out of the way will help us be able to focus on the most dangerous offenders like the operation you saw.
Can I just ask you about one other thing which seems to be emerging, which is trend amongst politicians to confront lawbreakers. We see Robert Jenrick confronting people on the tube, the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Phillips, fronting up to people he thinks might be illegal migrants working in the food delivery businesses. Good thing? Bad thing? Dangerous thing?
Politicians hold me to account. I don't tend to hold them to account for what they decide to do in terms of their profile.
But they can make your life harder or easier, can't they?
I'll let them get on with the politicking and I'll get on with policing London. Citizens, we always want citizens to help the police in whatever way they feel able. But I will focus on the policing and we will keep, whatever our resources are, we'll keep focusing on the most dangerous people, like you saw the other day, the most prolific local offenders, and we'll keep valuing the officers we're putting into communities to make that difference. So not only are you safer than some of the big cities, but you feel it because you see there are local officers who are tackling the things where you live.
Commissioner, thank you.
Trevor, thank you very much. Good to see you.
A wide-ranging interview with Sir Mark Rowley there. We'll hear from the Shadow Home Secretary shortly about some of the things that we talked about. But after this break, we'll discuss it first with our panel.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, DC.
Turkey is burying its dead.
Whole families died in this collapse. Generations wiped out. I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
Anyone could say, I'll do that, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
Sky News, get the full story first.
I'm Stephen Murphy and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin. The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks. If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Welcome back. Let's return to our panel. Greg Dyke, Cindy Yu and David Yelland. David, what did you make of that, particularly the issue of the public sense of the importance of crime?
I think the biggest question here is whether people feel safe in London or not. It's very interesting that he repeatedly said that they do, and that if you call 999 that the police will come. Well, that's not what Londoners feel, I think. But this whole thing about the thin blue line about whether people feel safe or not is very psychological, you know. I thought during the riots, we all realised there weren't many police protecting us from the mob. You know, that is... So when you see a commissioner interviewed, the primary thing they're aiming to do is to assure people that they're safe, when we all know that if things go wrong, that we're actually not safe.
Objectively, London is a safer city than...
Yeah, I think that's right.
...than most.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel like that.
Yeah, I think it's a changing nature of crime, that the things that are on the rise are things that we feel a bit more directly. Shoplifting, for example, you know, there was a video this week that was viral on X, and actually to David's point about the new media coming up, there were the classic suspects sharing that as if it was evidence that all crime is up, but actually it is just the kinds that are really, really, really visible to normal people. It diminishes trust in the police. And then also I think people have their own experiences with the police that actually are not always great. You know, I know people who have had laptops stolen, you know, phones stolen, things where modern technology can track where the thing is, but the police is just not going out there to the address that your technology is telling you where it is, and not resolving that kind of thing. So actually burglary is down, but the solving rate is just so low, it's about 2 or 3%, that there is just not enough trust in the police.
Greg and I go back a long way in covering crime in London, and actually, I want to hear what you think, Greg. But just one thing I'd say is that the thing that struck me most is how normalised all of this has become. We were in that block of flats for maybe nearly 2 hours. And what was striking was hardly anybody came out, not because they were afraid, but because it was so regular. Nobody was that bothered.
Yeah, that's a bit frightening, isn't it? I was thinking back and thinking, well, what crimes have happened to me? Someone did I was on the phone and someone came past on a bike and pinched my phone. But by and large, when he says it's one of the safest cities in the world, that is my experience. Now, there is another world going on out there that I'm not part of, isn't there? That's quite clear, because that's what you saw this week. But a long time ago, I made a television programme in Devon and Cornwall about community policing, and it is a long time ago. And they were sort of dismissed what they were doing in Devon and Cornwall by London because they were seen as hicks, you know, from the country. Actually, community policing, if we'd taken it very seriously then, and we'd sustained it with the resources, community policing would have changed the difference. You don't see a policeman, is the truth. And there is no policeman where I live. I don't see policemen where I live.
He would say, I guess, number one, there's a resource issue, but also, going back to Cindy's point, actually the nature of crime is such that maybe you don't need police officers going around on pavement. What you need are police officers dealing with the 50% of crime that is fraud, which is happening on the phone or on the internet.
Yes. We all get that every week, don't we? How many people do we get? I'm now quite rude to people who sort of start doing it. But we all get people who are trying to con us, basically. They're scammers. And some people are getting caught and they're getting badly affected by it. And that, well, again, what can the police do about that? I'm not sure I know.
I think policing has always been politicised, and many of the programmes you made over the years have been about that. But right now, it's politicised more than ever. The two-tier accusation about all kinds of things. That there's one set of rules for one people, one set of rules for other people, and then there's the resourcing. He talks about Levin's inquiry into the judicial system. For whatever reason, successive governments have taken up so much money out of the system, both the judicial system and the policing system, that he's dealing with an impossible task. And I do think we have a tendency to look at the people trying to solve problems, whether they be the gendarmes on the beaches with their knives or the head of the Met, and just attack that. I don't mean ours, I mean as a country, actually, not just the media.
But that is an issue. Resources almost everybody from the public sector who you will get on here will say, I could do more if I had the resources. Everyone. And yet we went into the last election knowing the economy in this country was in deep problems.
Yeah.
But that's why I think Mark Rowley's article in The Times that you asked him about, Trevor, was quite interesting, because he was talking about reform as well as resources.
Yes. Yeah.
Combining these county-level forces into greater regional forces, reducing duplication, that kind of stuff, which, is not asking for more money, it's just, can we do it in a better way? And I think that must be the way forward for all of these public sector questions, to become more efficient.
Well, his other complaint was about it become more bureaucratic. Yeah. Wasn't it? That was his other
exactly.
That interview, that it takes longer to do everything. Yeah. The paperwork.
On the issue of, if you like, the brand, David, which is your specialty, will the Met ever get out from under the issue of racial division?
Well, it depends who you ask and where you are in London. And if where the big debate is in the populist media at the moment is nothing to do with that, and perhaps it ought to be, but it is about two-tier policing, and it is about rules applying to certain people and certain others. And one of the things that the social media has had a very divisive effect in this area, exactly as you said, Cindy, is that one particular crime or one particular instance, like Lucy Letby, drives about 50% of the social media traffic around this issue at the moment. That is what people are talking about in conjunction with certain people who are in prison for posting things about what happened in Southport versus what's happening on the streets around post Glastonbury and so on. So and Reform think they can get elected off the back of that, and they may be right.
I think that's right. And so there's so much that's blown up about the free speech arrests that the Met and other police forces around the country do. I think there was a producer at Times Radio who had his house raided by a number of police people. And then there was someone else who got in trouble for owning a copy of The Spectator, having said some other things online.
That's a shocking crime.
Throw away the key.
But, that might be a small percentage, but it's stuff like that does not help, I think, the reputation of the
I wish we could talk about this more, but I want to blame Greg, because him and his football matches are soaking up all the time. But we have to go and earn some money, so let's go to a break. But after this break, we're going to hear from the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Phillips.
we are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Welcome back. We've heard from the government already this morning. Time for the opposition. Earlier, I spoke to the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp. Chris Philp, the Cabinet Minister, Heidi Alexander, says to me this morning that fairness will be the guiding principle of the autumn budget. Some people might think that's a hint of tax rises.
Yeah, that sounds to me like a barely disguised reference to tax rises coming in the autumn, even though Rachel Reeves promised last year there would be no further tax rises. She said that very clearly to the CBI. So why are Labour now talking about tax rises? Well, it's because they're in the process of crashing the economy. We've seen our economy shrink 2 months in a row now. That hasn't happened by accident. It's happened because Labour increased taxes and they are increasing regulation. We're seeing unemployment go up as well. That's now 12% higher than it was when Labour came to office. And they've also completely failed to reform welfare. They can't get anything past their own backbenchers. The consequence of all of that is going to be tax rises for people who are working hard and on businesses. It's nothing to do with fairness. By the way, it's a symptom of Labour failure.
If you cared so much about welfare reform, why didn't you help them in the vote?
Well, we set out the conditions that we would want to see met.
You set out conditions that you knew that they couldn't meet. Well, if you cared so much about it, why didn't you vote for their bill?
Well, by the time the bill came to the floor of the House, it had been gutted by their own backbenchers. And far from saving money, the bill which Labour finally presented to Parliament is actually going to cost more money because Keir Starmer is so weak he can't even stand up to his own backbenchers. And we're not going to vote for a bill that increases welfare expenditure even further. So anyway, as a result of his weakness, taxes are going to go up for everybody. It's got nothing to do with fairness. That is an extremely lame excuse. It's a symptom or a consequence of Labour's abject failure on the economy.
We've been running an interview that we did with the Commissioner of Metropolitan Police, Mark Rowley, in which he says that the racial disparities in homicides in the capital are, I'm quoting him here, shameful for the city. Do you agree?
Yes, I do. I think the fact that black Londoners, particularly, we should be specific, it's young men, and indeed boys, I mean, down to the age of potentially as young as 13 or 14, who are affected by violence, often gang-related violence, often knife-related. We have to do more. It's just not good enough. The fact that Labour and Sadiq Khan are causing the Metropolitan Police to shrink this year is deeply alarming in this context. Mark Rowley has said they're going to lose 1,500 police officers this year. Those are police officers who should be on the streets protecting all of London's community. So the police do need to do, that's extremely bad that Labour have done that to the police. But with the resources they have, there is more that should be done.
This is not a new problem. What do you wish you had done that you didn't do to tackle this issue when you were in charge?
Well, there are all kinds of things, initiatives that were commenced previously, things like violence reduction units, which were set up in the 20 most urban forces, designed to intervene early with youngsters getting on the wrong track.
By the look of it, they failed.
So I think more does need to be done, right? So one of the things I was working on late in the time of the last government, which I really hope the new government will continue, is doing work to identify individuals in each borough at a young age, like early teens, who are at risk of getting onto the wrong track, to make a more intensive intervention. I saw this actually in Croydon, where kids as young as like 12 or 13 can be on the cusp of getting into gangs. But if you intervene early, you can stop that. But you do also, besides preventative work, need to be policing on the streets. And that does include using stop and search more to take knives off the street.
Well, yes, but you've got to have cops to do that. And though Mark Rowley is very polite about this, he does make the point that for the last 3 years, they've actually had to cope with a reducing budget. 2 of those 3 years were your years. That was a mistake, wasn't it?
Well, no, the Met Police budget in cash terms has gone up.
In real terms, effectively.
Well, no, even adjusting for inflation, the budget has been going up. And actually, across England and Wales as a whole, at the end of our time in government, we delivered record ever numbers of police. Unfortunately, due to Sadiq Khan's incompetence in London, they didn't get all of the extra police they could have done because he didn't bother recruiting them. And now, this year, let me finish, Trevor, this year, we're going to see police numbers in London falling thanks to the Labour government and Sadiq Khan.
I'm sure Sadiq Khan is not going to agree that this was his fault, but the point is that this has happened on your watch as well as the new government. Isn't it time that on this particular thing, children are dying on the capital streets, you guys just stopped blaming each other and thought about how you might work together to stop it? This has been going on for a decade.
Yeah, look, I think police numbers are important. But look, there are two things we need to do, and I've touched on both of them already. One is the preventative piece, intervening early, not when someone's already 16 or 17 and involved in a gang, but much younger.
Yeah, that's
12 or 13.
That's not the question I asked you.
Well, that's something which we were doing in government, and I would certainly support the Labour government to continue. You asked about things we'd work together on. That's one of them. I think the second area is being willing to actually take action on the street to enforce safety, and that does include having the confidence to use stop and search. And I will support Mark Rowley in using stop and search to take knives off the street, because that does save lives.
All right. Talking about action on the streets, is it really sensible for politicians to be encouraging to confront lawbreakers in the way that Robert Jenrick has done with people who have been travelling for free on the tube?
Well, he was drawing attention to a really serious problem, which is the huge number of people evading fares, while the authorities, both Transport for London personnel and the police, basically stand by and do nothing. And I think he was quite right to draw attention to it.
But maybe brave of him to front up to somebody, but encouraging people to do that is surely encouraging them to endanger themselves.
Well, I think it's right to draw attention to it, as he did. And to be honest, to call attention and to call out criminality, including by members of the public, is a good thing. Get the police, call it out, call the police, and get the authorities involved. It's a good thing to do.
I put this to the Commissioner, and he described it as politicking. It is their job, not your job. Really, seriously, is this a sensible thing to do, to encourage people to get into this?
I think calling out
vigilante justice.
I think calling out criminality, as Robert did, is a good idea.
But he's doing more than calling out. He confronted somebody directly.
And he's perfectly entitled to do that.
Is that smart? Is that sensible? Is that responsible?
Yeah, I think he was right to do that, because people are breaking the law. They're taking the mickey, to be quite honest. And calling attention to that is a good thing to do. And there has actually been a little bit of action that has followed as a result. Not enough, I would add.
All right. Can you find it in your heart to congratulate the Home Secretary for achieving something that you and your predecessors failed to do, which is to strike a returns deal with the French?
Well, I'm not going to be congratulating the Labour government or the Home Secretary for presiding over record ever numbers of illegal immigrants crossing the Channel. This year so far... This year so far has been the worst ever.
I asked you, she made a deal. Wouldn't it be gracious to say, you did something?
Not really, because this deal will only see about 6% of illegal immigrants who arrive in the UK getting returned to France. And the idea that, therefore, 94% can stay here is going to have any effect is absolutely ludicrous. Of course, if 94% of illegal immigrants who cross can stay in the UK, that is no deterrent whatsoever. What might have been a deterrent is a 100% removal policy, which was ready under the Rwanda scheme. It went through all those court battles. It was ready to go, Trevor, as you know, just after the election, but they cancelled it.
When you say 100% Rwanda, I mean...
They cancelled it just before it was due to start.
There are 4 or 5 people got on a flight to Rwanda, and all of them were politicians. You didn't remove a single person to Rwanda.
Because, as I just said, it hadn't started. It was due to start just after the election on the 24th of July. I can be very precise, but Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper cancelled it just days before it was due to start. And what has happened since then? Numbers have surged by over 40%.
Just to remind me, because maybe my memory is failing me here, but I think the capacity that you had for removing people was something like 300. There are 50,000 people coming across the Channel this year, probably. Yeah. So there wasn't... The Rwanda scheme would have had almost no impact at all.
No, that's not true. So there was not a numerical cap on the number who could have been sent to Rwanda. And what you also find, to make a second point, is that once you start removing 100% of arrivals, within just a few months, like 2 or 3 months, people stop attempting the crossing, because why would you? Now, a very similar approach worked in Australia 12 or 13 years ago. The same approach would have worked here, and it was a massive mistake by Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper to cancel that scheme just days before it started, and as a result, numbers have surged, and this year so far has been the worst ever. Their plan to smash the gangs, by the way, which they used to talk about a lot, you don't hear them say a word about that because it has so laughably failed.
All right, this week your former party chair, Jake Berry, joined Reform. How many Conservative MPs are there on your defection watch list?
Well, I don't have a defection watch list. I would imagine, however, the answer is 0, because I don't think Conservative MPs are going to be taking them. Well, I don't think so, because look, if you look at Reform, they've got good slogans.
Just remember, when you say this, it is recorded. Are you sure that you think 0 MPs are going to leave and defect to Reform?
Well, I'd be astonished if anyone did, because Reform have good slogans, but they've got no specific concrete policies. We, for example, have tabled a border protection bill, a deportation bill, with concrete specific ideas. Reform don't have specific and credible ideas. And on welfare, that we touched on earlier, Reform plan to increase welfare expenditure, get rid of the 2-child cap, which means taxes will have to go up. And I think no responsible Conservative would want to see welfare going up even more and taxes going up, which is what a Reform government would end up delivering. That is not part of the DNA of any Conservative MP.
Chris Phillips, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.
In just a moment, we'll hear once again from our panel. We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Mayhem in the Middle East, rippling in America's West.
Get back! Get back!
The resolve of these protesters is now being seriously tested. I saw police being forced or pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests.
None of this is a peaceful protest.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. How are you feeling?
I am angry. It is an anti-woman agenda.
Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support, but it's nasty out there.
Anybody else?
Should the Defence Secretary and the Vice...
Wait, what country are you
from? The UK.
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting. Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
President Biden, do you trust President Xi? President Biden says that this meeting went well. He said real progress was made on a whole host of issues. Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
There's no doubt that Kamala Harris and her team are harnessing the power of social media. Do you think Kamala is brat?
Kamala's brat.
Are you scared?
Yeah, we were scared. It was terrible. Strong wind, building tearing down.
As them say, God works, so we can't do nothing.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. Sky News, get the full story first. Free wherever you get your news. Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
Turkey is burying its dead.
Whole families died in this collapse. Generations wiped out. I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
Anyone could say, I'll do that, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
Sky News, get the full story first.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin. The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks. If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet. on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Welcome back. Let's check in with our panel one final time. Greg Dyke, Cindy Yu and David Yelland. Greg, you reacted when Chris Phillips said that the government was crashing the economy.
Well,
what's that?
Well, we all know the economy's crashed, but it wasn't crashed in the last 12 months. It was crashed in the last decade. So it's very difficult for an opposition spokesman to come on but to be quite as blatant as that is quite, in some ways, is quite funny. The other bit about it I thought was interesting was your discussion with him about Jenrick, because what's quite clear is that this is Jenrick's one of the things he's doing to try to be the next leader of the Tory party. And it might well work, in which case it's been very successful for him. Whether it's successful for the world is another discussion.
I think Greg's being a bit kind here because on the crashing the economy quote, I mean, Chris Phillips was literally the chief secretary to the Treasury under Liz Truss.
Yes.
You know, the probably one of the biggest serious crashes that we've seen.
To be fair to him, last time he was on, he's on quite frequently, I did put that to him, and I think he said something like, I was a sort of, I was a junior person in the room, but I argued against it, he said.
Well, he would, wouldn't he? I mean, at this stage. But it is... I mean, it would be interesting to have a more serious discussion about where the economy is, isn't it? And your discussion with him about, couldn't you have a discussion about where the two of you come together and you discuss? I mean, the economy is clearly in a serious situation. It's not getting better. Government came in on the basis of growth. But I mean, I don't think politicians know about growth. Is the truth?
No, I think internationally, like the front of the Economist this week, it says Poundland. And it's Britain as Poundland. You know, people like Larry Fink is one of the biggest investors in the world that think this country's cheap labour. It's cheaper to make things in parts of the UK than it is in parts of India now. And that's a really unfashionable thing to say, but we are seen internationally as something of a failing state economically. And I think we have to, you never get that from the politicians, but that is what people think out there in the world, unfortunately. You know.
What did you make of what Chris Phillips had to say? I mean, it's a continuous criticism. Is there a way back for them?
I mean, the Jenrick point is really, really interesting, Greg, because what we're seeing is that the Conservative Party is led by a leader who is not dominating the news. And that actually her former rival, who is now one of her shadow cabinet members, is actually dominating the discussion much more. Yeah. So under Kami Badenoch, can the Conservatives really dominate the news agenda more than Nigel Farage? So far, that has been a no. Robert Jenrick has managed to, kind of hone in on these wedge issues like fare dodging, which, frankly speaking, is not a massive issue for the TfL's budget. It's not a massive issue but it is a massive issue that people talk about. Again, going back to the idea of visible crime. But he's the one dominating the news and not the party leader itself. So I think at the moment the trajectory is not looking great.
And remember, the Tories are very good at getting rid of leaders. Much more so than the Labour Party, who hang on there forever. Yeah. And you can't help feeling that Jenrick is making his play.
Absolutely. I think that one of the other things is the Tories aren't as good at populism as reform. You know, and if the Tories aren't populists, where are they? I mean, you look where they are in the polls.
Well, actually, we can see exactly where they are in the polls because we keep a keen eye on this. I think the thing that is most striking here is the persistence of the reform lead. Yeah. Even when Mr Farage isn't doing very much.
I think the other problem for the Conservatives, as we've already talked about on this panel, is that they have 14 years of a record being hit over their head every single time they come out and suggest and criticise the Labour government for something. They have so much baggage, and reform has no baggage at all. You know, their policies may not work, their maths may not add up, but people don't know that for sure. And that's clearly what drove Labour's victory. And now, a year on, people are getting impatient that Labour's not doing as well as it said they could. But frankly, the tasks at hand in this country are probably too difficult for...
That's right.
The big thing, of course, that we're all going to be talking about next couple of months is budget coming. Just 10, 15 seconds from each of you. Tax rises in the autumn, David?
I think there will be tax rises. I think they'll be disguised. They won't be the ones we think they're going to be, but there will be tax rises, yeah.
Greg?
Yeah, there has to be. There's no option. Last time I think I was on here, we discussed exactly this, and we all decided that there will be tax rises then. There's going to be tax rises. There has to be.
Yes.
Yeah.
think so.
Anybody got any choices they want to make? Stealth taxes,
Well,
corporation taxes?
we all want the ones that don't affect us, don't we? But I think probably you've got to go for people like myself who are outside. I personally think it's time to get rid of the triple lock for pensioners.
Okay.
I mean,
I'll make my normal weekly thing about why have we got a triple lock on pensions? Never mind. That's it for this week. You can watch Sophie every night at 7 this week, and I'll be back next Sunday, 8:30. See you then.